I found my dress shoe behind the radiator at 7:43 in the morning with a gym sock stuffed inside it and absolutely no memory of putting it there. I stood in my apartment hallway holding one shoe, still in my undershirt, staring at the radiator like it owed me an explanation. It did not offer one. I put the shoe on, grabbed my jacket off the back of the chair, poured my coffee into a travel mug I immediately left on the counter, and walked out the door into a drizzle so light it barely counted as rain but heavy enough to do real damage to a person trying to look professional. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of the Cortland Group building in downtown Chicago, I had 6 minutes before the quarterly board presentation was scheduled to begin. My left shoulder was damp. There was a small ink mark on my cuff from a pen that had leaked in my bag. I noticed it in the elevator mirror and decided it did not exist. I work in financial analysis at Cortland Group. Mid-level. The kind of position where you understand exactly how much you matter by counting how many rows of desks sit between you and the windows. Mine is 3 rows back. I have been here 18 months. Long enough to learn the rhythms of the place, who to trust, who to avoid, and which battles are worth picking. Greg, my direct supervisor, is the kind of person who takes credit smoothly and gives it back slowly, but he knows everyone worth knowing, and that has its uses. The vending machine on the 3rd floor has been broken since before I arrived, and nobody has filed a report because everyone has quietly accepted it as a permanent feature of the building, like the slow elevator and the flickering light in the 2nd floor men's room. And then there is Audrey Weston. I have worked at Cortland Group for 18 months, and I have seen Audrey Weston in person exactly 5 times. She has acknowledged my existence 0 of those times, not out of cruelty, but out of the simple fact that she operates several floors above the level where my name would naturally come up. She built this company, took something regional and mid-sized and turned it into a name that people in this industry say with a particular kind of respect, the kind that is not given easily and not forgotten quickly. She is sharp in a way that makes people around her sit up straighter without realizing they are doing it. Greg had spent 3 weeks preparing me for this presentation. Every number checked twice. Every slide rehearsed until it stopped feeling rehearsed. He told me not to ramble, not to over-explain, and under no circumstances to let nerves show in front of Audrey Weston. He said that last part 4 separate times. I walked into that boardroom looking exactly as nervous as I felt. She was already seated at the head of the table. Auburn hair loose around her shoulders. A charcoal blazer. A legal pad in front of her covered in notes she had clearly written before anyone else arrived. She glanced up when I walked in, took about half a second to assess me, and looked back down at her notes. Not dismissive. More like she had already sorted me into a category and moved on to the next item on her list. I connected my laptop, pulled up the first slide, and started talking. For the first 20 minutes, something close to a miracle happened. The numbers landed cleanly. I moved through the quarterly breakdown without stumbling. A senior board member asked a sharp question about the Eastern region projections, and I answered it without hesitating. I could feel the particular relief of someone who has prepared obsessively and is watching that preparation actually hold. And then my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I let it go. It buzzed again. I kept talking. Then 3 more times, fast, close together. That pattern meant one thing. Greg and I had agreed on it months earlier as a signal for genuine emergencies only. Not a client calling twice. Not a scheduling conflict. 3 fast buzzes meant something was actually wrong and I needed to answer. My hands kept moving through the slides. My voice kept going. But something behind my eyes had already left the room. Audrey Weston noticed before I finished the sentence I was in the middle of. I watched her tilt her head slightly, the way a person does when they have caught something small that everyone else missed. I stumbled over a line about projected margins. Just slightly, just enough. She said my name. Not loudly, not with any edge to it. Just my name, placed into the room like a question that already knew its answer. I stopped. She told me to answer my phone. Not as a suggestion, as a practical decision she had already made and was now simply informing me of. I stepped to the side of the room. 12 people watched me do it. I answered. It was my neighbor from my building, an older man named Harold who I mostly know from the mailbox area and occasional elevator rides. His voice was tight in the way people's voices get when they are trying to be calm about something that is not calm. He told me there had been a water leak from the unit above mine. My apartment had taken damage. The building manager needed me there as soon as possible to assess it before they could begin repairs and shut off the water to the entire floor. I ended the call. I looked up at 12 people looking back at me. I apologized. I explained briefly. I said I would have the remaining sections sent over by end of day. Audrey Weston looked at me for one long moment with an expression that gave nothing specific away, then told Greg to finish the presentation and gestured toward the door with the same efficiency she probably used to sign off on contracts. No drama. No visible irritación. Just a quiet redirection that somehow felt worse than anger would have. I picked up my bag and walked out of the boardroom. The elevator down felt very long. I stood watching the floor numbers drop and ran a slow, careful inventory of what I had just done. Walked out of a board presentation. In front of the entire executive team. In front of Audrey Weston, who forgot nothing and filed everything. 18 months of staying under the radar. 18 months of doing the work carefully and keeping my head down and building something small but solid. I had just complicated all of it in under 3 minutes. The elevator stopped. Not at the lobby. The doors opened onto a wide, carpeted hallway I had never seen before. Framed prints on the walls. Closed office doors. A silence that felt less like emptiness and more like privacy. The 39th floor. The executive level. I pressed the lobby button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. And then I heard it. It was not a loud sound. It was the kind of sound that people make when they are trying very hard not to make any sound at all, and the effort is starting to lose. Ragged at the edges. Controlled but barely. The kind of breathing that comes after something has cracked open inside a person and they are still deciding whether to let it break the rest of the way or pull it back together by force. I stood completely still in that carpeted hallway and listened. Every reasonable part of my brain lined up and made the case clearly. I was already in trouble. I had walked out of a board presentation in front of the most important people in this company. The smart move was to stand by the elevator, wait for it to cooperate, ride down to the lobby, go deal with my flooded apartment, and spend the rest of the day pretending the morning had never happened. I pressed the lobby button one more time. The elevator did not move. The sound came again, quieter this time, pulled back hard, like whoever it was had caught themselves and was reeling it in with both hands. I do not know exactly what made me step out of that elevator. Maybe it was the fact that I had already used up whatever careful, self-protective instincts I had left by 9 in the morning. Maybe it was something older than strategy. Either way, I stepped out into that hallway and walked toward the sound. The door at the far end of the hall was not fully closed. I raised my hand to knock. It swung open before I touched it. I should have looked away immediately. I knew it in the moment, the way you know something in your chest before your brain has finished forming the thought. But my brain was still a few seconds behind, still catching up to what my eyes were already taking in. Audrey Weston was standing at the marble counter of the executive washroom. Her blazer was folded neatly on the edge of the counter beside her. Her auburn hair was loose around her shoulders. Her back was partially turned to me, but her face was visible in the wide mirror above the sink. And her face was something I had never seen before and had no reference point for. It was completely unguarded. Eyes red, jaw tight, the expression of someone who has been crying and is furious at herself for it. Holding the pieces together through sheer discipline while one hand gripped the edge of the counter. And visible in the mirror's reflection, across her torso, were scars. Not from an accident. Not random. These were deliberate. Surgical. The kind that told a specific story if you had ever spent enough time in hospital waiting rooms to know what you were looking at. A mastectomy. Reconstructive work. Evidence of a medical battle she had clearly fought somewhere private. Somewhere far from this building. Somewhere no one who worked for her had ever been allowed to see. I had seen those scars before. Not hers. My wife's. The recognition hit me somewhere below thought. Then Audrey looked up and saw me in the mirror. What moved across her face in the next 2 seconds is something I will not forget for a long time. First, shock, pure and unguarded, the kind that cannot be faked because it arrives before the person has time to decide what expression they want to be wearing. Then something else came right behind it, Something raw and devastated that opened briefly like a door and then shut so fast I almost doubted I had seen it. Then ice. Absolute. Total. The kind of cold that is not a temperature but a decision made in real time. Get out. She said it quietly, barely above a conversational volume. And somehow that quietness made it land harder than if she had raised her voice. It left no room for misunderstanding and no space for negotiation. I backed up. My mouth opened. Something came out that was probably intended to be an apology but did not quite make it that far. I told her I had heard something, that I thought someone was hurt, that I had not meant to. She said get out again. Still quiet. Still completely controlled. She was already buttoning her blouse with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be, not looking at me in the mirror anymore, looking at nothing, jaw set, the private part of herself already being sealed back up behind the professional surface. I left. I found the elevator waiting with its doors open, stepped in, and rode down to the lobby in complete silence. The drive to my building was automatic. I parked, went upstairs, and stood in my bathroom while the building manager walked me through the water damage I could not make myself focus on. The ceiling had a long dark stain spreading toward the light fixture. The rug was ruined. A section of the baseboard near the tub had swollen soft. The building manager said they could start repairs Thursday. I said fine. He left. I sat on my couch and looked at nothing for a while. What I had seen was not mine. I understood that clearly and without any need to think it through. Whatever Audrey Weston had been through, whatever that surgery had cost her, she had chosen to carry it privately. She had built something significant, led a company at the highest level, made hard calls in difficult rooms, and done all of it while keeping something deeply personal completely out of sight. Not out of shame. Something else. Something I understood better than I could have explained to anyone. My phone lit up on the cushion beside me. A text from Greg. 4 words. Her office. 7 tonight. I read it twice. I put the phone face down and sat there in my quiet, damaged apartment while the afternoon light moved across the water stain on my ceiling, trying to figure out what a person was supposed to say to a woman who had just been seen in the one moment she had spent years making sure nobody would ever see. I had nothing. 7 o'clock came anyway. She did not ask me to sit down. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked into her office at 7 that evening. The chair across from her desk was right there, empty, perfectly available, and she said nothing about it. She just looked at me from behind that desk with her hands folded on top of it and her expression giving away exactly nothing. I stood. The office was different at night. During the day, light came through the tall windows and made the whole room feel open and forward-moving. At night, with just the desk lamp on, the room felt smaller, more contained, like a place where the walls were paying attention. Audrey Weston looked exactly the same as she always did. Blazer, auburn hair loose around her shoulders, posture that suggested she had never once slouched in her life. If I had not seen what I saw that morning, I would have had no way of knowing that anything had happened at all. She had put every piece of herself back in place so completely that the version of her I had seen in that washroom mirror felt almost like something I had imagined. Almost. She spoke first. Mr. Calloway, I want to understand something. She paused just long enough to make sure I was listening. What exactly do you plan to do with what you saw this morning? I blinked. Do with it? Information like that has value. Her voice was even, measured. The same tone she probably used in contract negotiations. Medical history, personal details. In the right hands or the wrong ones, something like that becomes leverage. I need to know which kind of hands yours are. The accusation landed hard. Not because it was aggressive, because it was so completely reasonable coming from her. She had done the math and arrived at the most logical concern. She was not being paranoid. She was being precise. And precision, I had learned, was how Audrey Weston moved through every room she entered. I was quiet for a moment. Then I told her about my wife. I did not plan to. The words just arrived, already formed, like they had been waiting somewhere close to the surface without my knowing it. I told her my wife died 3 years ago, that she had cancer in 2 places at the same time, that I spent 18 months learning what hospital waiting rooms sound like at 2 in the morning and what it feels like to watch someone you love fight something you cannot help them fight. I told her about the way people looked at my wife after they found out. The way their eyes would shift slightly, like they were doing a quiet calculation, measuring how much of her was still here versus how much had already started to leave. Like her illness had become the headline and everything else about her had been moved to the bottom of the page. I told Audrey that I would never use someone's medical history as a weapon. Not for any amount of anything. Not under any circumstances. The room was very quiet when I finished. Something moved behind her eyes. Small. Quick. Gone before I could name it. She held my gaze for a moment that stretched longer than a moment usually does, and then she stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the city below with her hands at her sides. Not crossed. Not gripping anything. Just still. I had a double mastectomy 14 months ago, she said. She did not look at me when she said it. She said it to the window, to the city, to whatever version of herself had decided tonight was the night to say it out loud to another person. She told me it was preventive surgery, that her mother had died of breast cancer when Audrey was young, that she had tested positive for the same genetic risk and made a decision before the disease had a chance to make it for her. She said it with the same calm she used for everything, but underneath the calm was something that had clearly cost her. Not the surgery. The silence around it. No one at this company knows, she said. Not the board. Not my executive team. Not anyone who works in this building. She turned back to face me then. I chose to fight that battle privately and come out the other side on my own terms, she said, because I knew exactly what would happen the moment people found out. Every decision I made would get filtered through it. Every hard quarter. Every bold move. Every room I walked into would carry a quiet question underneath it. Is she really well enough for this? Is she still the person we trusted with all of it? She paused. I was not willing to let my survival become someone else's reason to doubt me. I understood that. Not abstractly. I understood it the way you understand something when you have watched it happen to someone you loved. She studied me for a long moment. The kind of look that is not unkind but does not miss anything either. Then she said something I was not prepared for. She told me to go home, and to be back in her office Monday morning at 8. She said there was a project she had been considering putting in front of someone for weeks, and she had not found the right person for it yet. She thought it might be me. I nodded. I walked to the door. Just before I reached it, she said my name again. Quietly. The way you say something when you mean it more than the words themselves can carry. Thank you, she said, for not making this into something it does not have to be. I left without answering because I could not find words that fit inside that moment without making it smaller than it was. I rode the elevator down alone, walked out into the cool night air, stood on the sidewalk outside the Cortland building for a moment before walking to my car. The city was doing what cities do at night, moving, humming, indifferent to whatever had just happened on the 39th floor. I had walked into that office expecting to be dismissed, maybe moved to a different team, maybe quietly managed out of the company within the month. Instead, something had shifted. I could not explain it clearly and I was not going to try. But something that had not existed this morning was real now, sitting between us in a way that neither of us had planned for and neither of us had named yet. Monday was 3 days away. I drove home thinking about all of it and somehow none of it at the same time. Monday came faster than I was ready for. I was at the Cortland building by 7:58, which is the closest I have ever come to being early for anything. Her assistant's desk was already occupied. A woman named Brenda who had worked on the executive floor for 11 years and had the particular calm of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. She looked up when I stepped off the elevator, checked something on her screen, and told me to go right in. Audrey was already at her desk with 2 cups of coffee on the corner of it. One on her side, one on the other side. Mine had the right amount of everything in it and I had never once told her how I took it. I sat down. I did not mention the coffee. She did not mention it either. We opened our laptops and got to work. The project was the Cortland Group's expansion into 3 new markets across the Southeast. New partnerships, risk frameworks, revenue projections, entry timelines. The kind of work that required long hours and a high tolerance for being wrong several times before getting it right. It was bigger than anything I had touched in my career so far, and she had handed it to me like it was a natural next step, like she had already decided I was capable of it, and the only thing left was for me to catch up to her conclusion. What I had not expected was how much time we would spend in the same room while building it. She was not supervising me. She was not checking my work over my shoulder. She would come in with her own materials, sit across the table, and work on her own projects in parallel. Some evenings we talked through problems out loud, bouncing ideas back and forth until something clicked. Other evenings we sat in the same silence for an hour and a half without exchanging a single word, and it was comfortable in a way I could not fully account for. Greg noticed. He stopped by my workstation one afternoon with a look on his face that was trying to be casual and not quite making it. Mentioned that people were talking. Said it with the particular careful tone of someone delivering a warning dressed up as information. I thanked him and went back to my work. Whatever people were saying, I could not do anything about it, and I was not going to let it shrink something that was still finding its shape. 3 weeks into the project, I caught a significant error in a market projection. I had built the affected section myself, which made it worse. I found it around 7 in the evening when the floor was empty. I fixed it, rebuilt the sections that depended on it, and sent Audrey a short note flagging what had happened and what I had corrected. I expected a measured response in the morning. Her reply came 11 minutes later. 4 words. Good catch. Get some sleep. Nothing about the mistake itself. Just the fix acknowledged and the moment moved past. I stared at that message longer than made sense, then closed my laptop and went home. Then came the fundraiser, and everything I thought I understood got quietly rearranged. It was a black tie event downtown. A fundraiser for cancer research held at a hotel with chandeliers that cost more than most cars and conversations carefully designed to feel meaningful without getting too specific. Audrey was the keynote speaker. She had asked me to attend 2 days earlier, plainly and directly, the way she did everything. She said these events carried a particular weight for reasons she did not need to explain to me, and she would rather not navigate that weight alone. I said yes. I sat near the back during dinner and watched her work the room. She moved through conversations with the precision of someone who had been doing this for years. Gracious where it was called for. Firm where it was not. She was impressive in the way that is easy to overlook if you are not paying close attention. Then she walked to the podium. She was 4 minutes into her prepared remarks when she stopped. Not because she lost her place. She stopped on purpose. I could see it from across the room. She looked out at the audience for a moment, then set down the paper she was holding, and told 300 people the truth. She talked about the surgery, about her mother, about the years she had spent performing a kind of strength that left no room for the real kind, because she had calculated that being honest would cost her more than it was worth. Her voice was steady all the way through. She did not cry, but she was the most undefended I had ever seen her, standing at that podium with nothing between her and the room was completely still. The applause when she finished was not polite. It was real in a way that filled the space differently than polite applause does. She walked off the stage and did not stop moving. I fell into step beside her and we walked 6 blocks through the night air informal without discussing where we were going. We ended up in a diner with duct-taped booth seats and a waitress named Carol who called us both honey without a trace of irony and poured coffee that was too strong and absolutely right for the moment. We stayed for 2 hours. We talked about nothing on either of our resumes. A hiking trip I had taken alone after my wife died that had gone wrong in 3 separate ways.